On a deserted beach, a girl finds a beautiful woman unconscious. To help her, the girl takes her to her home in a village. Soon, mysterious disappearances begin to occur. What is happening? On a beach where the waves gently broke upon the golden sand, the sun had already said its farewell, leaving the sky tinged with shades of orange and violet. It was a calm late afternoon, and Amale, with eyes that reflected the serenity of the ocean, walked barefoot. Her feet sank slightly into the damp sand, and she allowed herself to smile as she listened to the rhythmic sound of the waves. Amale loved being alone there. The beach to her was a refuge, a space where she could escape the obligations that filled her days in the nearby village. She watched the small crabs hiding in their burrows, smelled the salty air, and let the night breeze mess up the braids she had carefully made that morning. As she walked toward a point where the sea met a cluster of rocks, she saw something unusual. At first, it appeared to be just a shadow, something undefined contrasting against the pale sand. Curious, Amale approached, furrowing her brow. Her steps slowed when she realized the outline of a human figure. It was a woman. She was lying on the sand, motionless. Amale hesitated, feeling her heart race. Instinctively, she looked around, but the beach was empty. No sign of another person, just her and the unconscious woman. The young woman knelt, her fingers carefully touching the stranger's shoulder. Her skin was cold, but not rigid. Fixing her gaze on the woman's face, Amale noticed her striking features. It was difficult to tell if she was from the village or came from somewhere else. "Can you hear me?" Amale asked, her voice trembling slightly. There was no response. The fallen woman began to move lightly, as though caught between a deep sleep and wakefulness. It was such a subtle movement that Amale wondered if she had imagined it. "Who are you?" murmured Amale. The young woman blinked quickly, as if trying to organize the questions beginning to form in her mind. I'm Amale. Are you okay?" she asked, somewhat unsure. The stranger seemed confused, as if she didn't know where she was. Her eyes wandered across the surroundings. What was happening? It was a question that, at that moment, seemed to float between them both. Amale was watching the woman in front of her. Her gaze seemed lost, as if she were trying to place herself in time and space. Slowly, Amale leaned in a little closer, lowering her voice so as not to frighten her. "What is your name?" she asked gently. The woman opened her mouth as if to answer, but no sound came out. Her eyes filled with a mixture of confusion and perhaps a touch of despair. Amale waited, but the silence that followed was deafening. "Can't you speak?" Amale tried again, choosing her words carefully. The woman just stared at her, her expression carrying a mixture of exhaustion and pain. For a brief moment, Amale thought that perhaps she was mute. That would explain the silence. After a pause, Amale sighed. She stood up and extended her hand to the woman. "You need help. I'll take you to my house. It's okay. You're going to be fine." The woman hesitated, but after a moment, she accepted the outstretched hand. With effort, Amale helped her stand. She was light, but clearly weak. Her unsteady posture forced Amale to hold her by the arm to keep her from falling. As they slowly walked across the sand toward the village, Amale wondered what to do next. As much as she wanted answers, it was clear that this woman needed rest before anything else. Had something terrible happened? The questions lingered in Amale's mind, but for now they would remain unanswered. When they reached Amale's house, the young woman helped the stranger sit on one of the wooden benches in the corner of the room. She fetched a small jug of water, filled a clay bowl, and handed it to the woman, who accepted it with a slight nod. She drank slowly, as if each sip required effort. Amale watched her closely, still intrigued. "Don't worry, you can stay here. I'll take care of you." She tried to smile, even though the situation felt increasingly unsettling. The woman finished drinking, placed the bowl on the table, and lowered her gaze, as if she didn't have the strength to face Amale. The silence between them was almost palpable. Amale leaned back against the wall of the house, crossing her arms, and allowed the question to return to her mind. "Who are you, after all?" Amale observed the woman for a few moments, trying to decipher what might have happened. There was something in her eyes, a void mixed with pain, that made Amali believe this woman carried more than just physical exhaustion. She sighed, pushing the thoughts away for a moment. It didn't make sense to insist on questions now. If the woman was weak and silent, perhaps she had been through something that even words couldn't immediately explain. A trauma, perhaps? That idea hammered in Amali's mind. It wasn't uncommon to hear stories of people facing the sea, fleeing from something, or arriving without memory of who they were. You can rest. I won't ask any more questions now, okay? Tomorrow we'll talk. She didn't know if the woman would fully understand, but she felt she needed to say something comforting. The woman only nodded slightly without raising her eyes. She seemed exhausted, not just in her body, but in her soul. Amali stood up, fetched a blanket, and handed it to the woman. She watched as the woman wrapped it around her shoulders and settled in. I'll prepare a place for you to sleep, said Amali, leaving to gather some cloths and pillows. As she did so, her mind continued to wander. Something about this situation felt different, mysterious. But Amali decided it wasn't the time to try to unravel it. Some answers needed time, and whatever the woman's story was, the young woman knew she had to wait. Tomorrow would be another day, and perhaps a day with more clarity. The next morning, Amali woke early and noticed that the woman, for whom she had prepared an improvised bed, was already awake and introspective. Trying to break the silence, Amali served porridge and handed it to the woman, who accepted it without words, only thanking her with a slight gesture. After the meal, Amali tried to talk again. She asked the woman's name and where she was from, but the stranger seemed unable to speak, frustrated and trapped in an unsettling silence. Persisting, Amali tried a different approach. She introduced herself and gestured for the woman to do the same, but the woman only shook her head, as if even simple gestures were impossible. Amali speculated about her origin, asking if she was running from something, but she received no clear answers. Intrigued and frustrated, Amali found herself facing a mystery. Who was this woman? What had happened to her? The questions echoed without answers, leaving Amali with a puzzle still unsolved. Amali reflected as she organized some supplies on the small table in her house. There was a doctor who attended to people a few kilometers from her home in a larger community where they might be able to help the mysterious woman. The idea seemed logical to her. If the woman couldn't speak and there were no clear signs of what was stopping her, a doctor might find answers. 3 days. Amal decided to herself. Amala would also notify the proper authorities about the situation. Until then, the woman could stay under her care. She looked at the woman standing near the window, now less frail but still silent. It didn't make sense to keep calling her the woman all the time. Amali thought for a moment and then smiled. I'll call you Nia, she said softly, testing the name on her lips. It's a beautiful name, and I think it suits you. The woman lifted her eyes as if surprised, but she didn't object. It was the first sign of any connection since Amali had found her. In the days that followed, Amali tried to make Nia feel more comfortable, even without obtaining clear answers. Gradually, she noticed that Nia seemed to appreciate the small gestures. She ate what was offered, accepted the blankets to stay warm, and even gave faint smiles when Amali spoke about village stories or described the beauty of the surroundings. Amali also decided that taking Nia outside might be a good idea. Short walks could help distract her or even trigger memories she might have forgotten. That morning, Amali invited Nia to return to the beach. They walked side by side, the salty breeze tousling both their hair. Amali tried to keep a light tone as she pointed to the waves. This beach has always been my favorite place, she commented. It's where I come to think, to forget the world for a while. Maybe you feel the same. Nia stopped for a moment, staring at the sea, her eyes fixed on the horizon for long seconds. But she made no gesture or sign that Amali could interpret. The young woman waited without pressing her. At other moments, Amali took Nia to the village outskirts, showing her the small stream where she used to fetch water and the cassava fields that grew part of the community's food. Nia seemed more at ease in Amali's company, although she remained trapped in her silence. Amali noticed that, even without speaking, Nia showed interest in the place, observing everything with attention. Despite this, Amali couldn't ignore that there were still many unanswered questions. With each walk, with each gesture, the same unease returned. "Who are you, Nya? Why the silence? What happened to you before you arrived here?" Amali watched Nya, who was in the living room, playing with a palm leaf that Amal had left there. Something about her behavior seemed different that night. Nya looked at Amal and pointed to the door, then to herself. Her eyes conveyed a mix of determination and calm. "You want to go out? Alone?" Amale asked, immediately worried. "Nya, it's already late. You know you don't know the village very well. What if you get lost?" Nya, however, insisted with a gentle gesture, standing up and pointing to the door again. Amale sighed, her concern evident. "All right," she said reluctantly, "but be careful. Don't go too far, and if you need help, come back quickly, okay?" Nya simply nodded. Amale stood at the door, watching as she walked toward the village. The village was calm at that hour. A few children were still playing on the dirt street, their laughter echoing softly. When Naya passed by, their small figures stopped and watched her with curiosity. Whispers began to spread among them. Naya's presence seemed to attract attention, perhaps because of her enigmatic beauty or the way she walked with an almost supernatural grace. Nya paid them little attention. Her focus seemed to be elsewhere. She kept walking, leaving the village and following the path that led to the beach. The cold sand under her feet guided her to where the waves spread gently. After walking for some time, she saw a young man sitting near the water's edge, a piece of wood in his hands as he drew simple lines in the wet sand. He seemed absorbed in his thoughts until he noticed Nia approaching. He looked up, curious about the figure coming toward him. "Good evening," he said, smiling. "My name is Sefu. And yours?" Nia stopped in front of him, her eyes fixed on his with an intensity that made the young man's smile falter. She said nothing, only tilted her head slightly, as if studying every detail of his expression. Sefu raised his eyebrows, unsettled. "Are you mute?" he asked, trying to hide his discomfort. When Naya only gave a small smile, he concluded that she probably was. "That's okay. I can keep you company if you'd like. It's not safe to be alone out here at night." Naya extended her hand in an almost imperceptible motion, a silent invitation. Sefu accepted, standing up and walking beside her. As the night fell, they strolled along the beach, their bare feet touching the cold sand. Sefu asked questions, trying to make conversation. "Where are you from? Do you live in the village? Are you alone?" She didn't answer with words, but her gestures and looks seemed to seduce the young man, keeping him intrigued and eager for more. He laughed nervously, but couldn't pull himself away from her. It was as if something about her held him, ensnaring him in a game he didn't fully understand. Now, with their feet in the water, Nya moved closer. The subtle touch of the night breeze was muffled by the sound of the waves. Sefu kept talking, but seemed increasingly disconnected from his own words. Nya looked at him, her eyes deep and shining like the sea itself. He stopped talking, his expression spellbound. Without realizing it, Sefu allowed her to lead him deeper into the sea. Each step forward was guided by her gaze, which seemed to completely hypnotize him. The water rose to his knees, then to his waist. The night grew darker, the waves higher, but Sefu didn't seem to notice. His eyes were locked on Naya's. Suddenly, both disappeared beneath the water. Silence returned to the beach, broken only by the rhythmic sound of the waves. Time passed and Naya emerged from the sea. She walked with slow, deliberate steps across the wet sand, seemingly unaffected by the cold of the night. Her eyes shone in a peculiar way, as if they held a secret no one would ever be able to unravel. As she approached the house, Nia noticed the flickering light of a lit lamp. Amale was awake, waiting for her. As soon as Naya entered, Amale looked at her, her face lighting up with a mixture of relief and curiosity. "Did you have a good time, Naya?" Amale asked with a welcoming smile, as she set aside the piece of fabric she was mending. Naya did not reply immediately, but her lips curled into an infectious smile, one so sincere and captivating that Amale let out a giggle, relaxing even more. "You enjoyed walking alone," Amale remarked as she stood up to fetch a blanket and handed it to Naya. "It seems you're starting to get used to this place. Maybe soon you'll tell me more about who you really are." Naya simply nodded slightly, still with that smile that seemed to hide more than it revealed. Amali did not press her. She believed the answers would come in time. As Nia settled in to rest, Amali extinguished the lamp, leaving the room immersed in the peaceful darkness of the night. Another night had passed in the lives of the two women, each carrying their own mysteries and questions, but finding a strange balance in that silent coexistence. Amali decided it would be a good idea to take Nia to the stream for a bath and to try fishing a little. The day was hot, and the stream, with its cool and tranquil water, seemed like the perfect place to relax and enjoy the afternoon. As they walked along the trail cutting through the forest, Amali carried a small fishing bucket and a towel. Nia walked silently beside her, her steps light and almost imperceptible, as usual. Midway down the trail, Amali spotted a familiar figure approaching from the opposite direction. It was Thandeka, carrying a basket of freshly picked fruit. Upon seeing her, Amali smiled and raised a hand in greeting. Thandeka returned the smile, but her gaze quickly shifted to Nia, who stood a few steps behind Amali, observing the conversation with her usual reserved expression. Curious, Thandeka asked about the new companion. Amali explained that she had found Nia on the beach, unconscious and with no memory, and that since then, Nia had been under her care. Thandeka gave Nia a long, scrutinizing look, but Nia remained silent, her eyes fixed on some distant point along the trail. Moving a bit closer, Thandeka lowered her voice to warn Amali about the rumors circulating in the village. Some said Nia was a sea witch, a creature sent to bring misfortune. Others believed she was merely a lost woman. Amali sighed and defended Nia, insisting that she seemed to be just someone in need of help. Concerned, Thandeka advised Amali to be cautious with the rumors spreading around. After their conversation, Thandeka said her goodbyes, casting one last wary glance at Nia before continuing down the trail. Amali stood in thought for a few moments, watching her friend walk away. Then turning to Nia, she suggested they continue their path. Nia followed her silently. The two resumed their walk toward the stream, while the encounter with Thandeka still lingered in Amali's mind. Determined, she shook her head, intent on enjoying the moment and leaving her worries for another time. Amali was at the stream, balancing on smooth stones while holding an improvised fishing net. The sound of the flowing water was soothing, and the sunlight filtering through the trees made the moment even more pleasant. Nia, on the other hand, seemed completely at ease in the water. Without needing any tools, she moved with impressive skill, almost as if the stream was a natural extension of herself. Amali stood gaping as she watched Nia dive and resurface with a large fish in her hands. "Nia," she exclaimed, laughing in surprise. "How do you do that? I can barely hold the net, and you catch them with your hands. It's incredible." Nia responded with a shy smile, but her eyes shone with satisfaction. She dove again, moving with a speed that impressed Amali even more. Every movement was precise, fluid, almost elegant. The fish seemed to stand no chance against her. "You look like you were born for this," Amali commented as she placed the captured fish into a basket. "I've never seen anyone fish like that. Not even the most experienced men in the village can do what you do." Nia merely shrugged, continuing her fishing as though it were natural. Amali watched in fascination, but at the same time, she couldn't help but feel an unsettling thought creep into her mind. As promised, Amali took Nia to the doctor at the small clinic located in the center of the village. The appointment began in a tense atmosphere. Nia showed evident discomfort, avoiding the doctor's gaze and maintaining a defensive posture. Despite Amal's attempts to reassure her by lightly holding her hand, Nia's restlessness was apparent in every movement. The doctor tried to perform basic clinical procedures, but Nia recoiled every time he approached with an instrument. Noticing her resistance, he decided not to insist. With patience, the doctor explained that it would not be wise to force anything, suggesting that people in situations like Nia's might have deep reasons for avoiding examinations. Instead, he chose to proceed with a series of questions, hoping to uncover something about Nia's origin, health condition, or memories. Amali explained that Nia was unable to speak, but sometimes communicated through gestures. However, Nia's responses, when they came, were always vague or incomplete. After several minutes of trying to obtain clear information and without conducting any examinations, the doctor concluded that it would be difficult to reach a diagnosis. As an alternative, he suggested that Nya undergo psychological counseling, as there might be trauma blocking both her memory and her speech. Amal listened to the recommendation with concern, thanked the doctor for his effort, and promised to consider the suggestion, though she wasn't sure how Naya would react to the idea. After the appointment, Amalie took another step. She decided to inform the local authorities about Nya's case. She reported everything she knew, starting from the moment she found Nya on the beach. The officers listened attentively, but their responses were vague, limiting themselves to saying they would investigate. Amalie returned home with Naya, feeling a heavy weight on her heart. The mystery surrounding the woman seemed to deepen with every step, as if Naya were an unsolvable enigma. For now, Amalie knew that all she could do was continue to care for her, even as the doubts grew stronger each day. It was already late when Nya left for her usual nighttime walk through the village. Her graceful stride and serene presence drew the attention of everyone, especially the women who were still gathered in front of their houses. As soon as she passed, whispers began. "Who could that woman be?" one of them asked, watching Nya walk away. "They say Amalie found her lost on the beach, with no memory," replied another, leaning in to whisper. "The poor thing must have come from some distant place, maybe running from something." "Or hiding something," murmured a third with a suspicious look. "She's so different. She doesn't talk to anyone except Amalie. Who knows what she really wants?" Nya seemed oblivious to the conversations, but it was impossible to say how much she truly noticed or understood of what was said around her. Her face remained calm, almost impenetrable, as she continued her walk. For many there, her beauty and silence were as intriguing as they were unsettling. The whispers continued even after Naya disappeared into the shadows of the village streets. Nya walked through the silent village streets, the faint moonlight illuminating the dirt path. In the distance, a man stepped out of a small bar. His steps were a little unsteady, but his eyes, alert, soon caught sight of Naya walking just a few meters away. He stopped, watching her for a moment before flashing a confident smile and walking in her direction. "Hey, hello!" he called, his voice a bit hoarse. But Naya didn't stop. She kept walking, her steps becoming a little faster, as if she wanted to avoid contact. The man didn't give up. He quickened his pace, clearly interested. "Wait up! I just want to talk!" Nya didn't look back. She only continued heading toward the beach, leaving the village behind. The man, determined, followed her. The farther she went, the more intrigued and eager he seemed to catch up to her. Finally, they reached an isolated part of the beach, where the sound of the crashing waves was the only thing filling the silence. The man stopped, slightly out of breath, as Nya turned to face him. "My name's William," he said with a friendly smile. "And yours?" Naya looked at him silently, her eyes glowing in the faint moonlight. She made a vague gesture, pointing to her own throat and then shaking her head, trying to show that she couldn't speak. William frowned, but his smile didn't fade. "Ah, you can't talk, is that it? Well, that's okay. We can understand each other in other ways." Nya tilted her head slightly, watching him with that deep, enigmatic gaze that seemed to capture anyone's attention. Then she pointed toward the sea ahead and back at herself, suggesting that she wanted to swim. "You want to swim?" William asked, surprised. He looked at the sea and then back at her, chuckling a little. "Well, it's late, but why not?" Naya smiled, a subtle but inviting smile. She walked into the water, letting the waves wash over her feet. William hesitated for a moment, but there was something so intriguing about her that he couldn't refuse. He followed her, stepping into the cold water as the waves gently lapped against his legs. "You're really mysterious, you know," he commented, trying to make conversation as they both ventured into deeper waters. "But I think that's part of your charm." Nya didn't respond. She only looked at him with a gleam in her eyes that seemed to hypnotize him. The silence between them was broken only by the sound of the sea as the water rose higher and higher around their bodies. William vanished into the sea with Naya. William was lured into the unknown by a mysterious and seductive woman. Beneath the deep waters, Nya was no longer just the woman Amalie had encountered. Her form had changed. Her eyes, now brighter, stared into the void, while her lips curved into an enigmatic smile. There was no sign of William. Nia remained there, a creature both fascinating and terrifying, submerged in the depths. Nia held a secret, something terrible, something no one could ever imagine.